pass again. So you can't have it on your hip. You can do a concealed carry, obviously, but there are things that inhibit a concealed carry as well for people. But I guess my question is, as far as what you were talking about with gun laws being willy nilly, to come back to it, I guess my question was, do you see gun laws not as written per se, but as applied? Do you see them as being differential between whites and blacks?
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Um, yes, it's clearly different based on common law. Like in Ohio, that's a open carry state.
Mm.
They shot Tamir Rice, who had a toy gun. He didn't point his gun at anybody. He was in the park with a toy gun, and they knew he was a kid. And they blew him away.
Mm.
So yeah,
Right. Well, I mean, that's more of an action by someone, which I obviously don't agree with. I'm talking more along the lines of, and then when you talk about common law, they're short of Louisiana, which practices actually civil law, which they got from the French. Common law exists, but it's not applied anymore. So all of the states,
yes, yes, sir. Yes, it is.
no, all of the states have statutes which are codified. So we don't follow
No,
common law anymore. We actually have statutes now.
no, no, sir.
Yes.
Common law is just what people do and agree to. Common law is what we saw with Kyle Rittenhouse. Okay,
Mm.
the stuff you saw in that courtroom, a black person wouldn't get that in a million years.
Uh,
The stuff that you saw was based on common law. Sitting up here talking about you can't call the people Kyle Rittenhouse shot victims. That's common law. It's not written down anywhere. It's a common law. It's something that somebody said who's white and other white people agree to it, and they're not going to punish them based on what they agree to. That's a common law. It's not written down, but it's something that
mm.
they agree to. Now, if a black person went in there, they wouldn't do that in a million years. They would never say a person you shot, we're not going to call them a victim. Common law we're going to go to the gun laws. Philando Castile up there in Minnesota. He was a Second Amendment advocate. He legally had a gun. Officer Yanez, who went to a bulletproof training class, which is run by white supremacists who teach officers how to kill people and get away with it. He went to one of those classes and blew Philando Castile away, who was a legal gun carrier, and Officer Yanez got off. That's common law, sir. Common law is applied when it comes to black people. And that's an understanding that people who believe in white supremacy all get together and practice. Common law is extremely real, sir.
Okay. Let me know when I can reply, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is with all due respect, because I do come in here and I do enjoy the conversations. Obviously I don't agree with some things you say, but that's not common law. You're talking about potentially past pattern and practices. You're talking about the Florida Code of Evidence. You're talking about the Federal Code of Evidence, but that's not common law. So I guess what I would ask you is, what is your definition of common law? Because I know what it is, and what you're describing is not common law.
That's common law. When you do something and you
Mm.
certain statutes that are not written down and they through the legal system. That's all a common law is. And white supremacy itself is a common law.
Okay. Uh, Tariq, I'm sorry. The very first part cut out. I couldn't hear the first part of what you said. I'm sorry.
Okay. Common laws, those are just statutes that are agreed upon, that are not written
Mhm.
down, that people within the dominant society all agree upon. That's all a common law is. Just like
Well,
common law marriage. All right. Common law
sure,
marriage.
sure, sure,
Right. The
sure.
same thing.
But right, but statutes by definition have to be written down. So your definition is, as you would say, a non sequitur, because a common law must be. You said a common law is a statute that's not written down. That doesn't
Right.
exist. That doesn't exist,
A
sir.
verbal
A
statute,
statute.
a verbal
Uh,
statute, sir. A verbal statute is very
there's no such
real.
thing. There's no
Yes, it
such thing.
is. Yeah, there's an
Name one for
understanding.
me. Name one for me. There's
White,
not.
sir, white supremacy itself is a verbal statute now.
That's a verbal statute.
Yes, it is. It
Where can
used
I
to be.
find it?
It's verbal. It's verbal.
Who
It
do I have to
used to
ask about it?
listen. It used to be written down, and they said, "Okay, we got to codify white supremacy. Let's take all the books and let's say everything is equal." We're still going to verbally practice these statutes that were written. Okay, that's what a common
Sure.
law is.
Sure. Tariq, I absolutely agree with that, except for the point, it's not a statute. Common law, if you want to say common law are past practices and patterns, I would agree with you on that. To say it's a verbal statute,
Yep.
those two words cannot go together, sir.
Yes, they can. Yes, they can.
Show me one. Show me one.
Define what a statute is.
A statute is a codified law that has been passed through legislature, signed by the Congress or the president or the governor, and actually codified, written into law as a statute, which people
No,
must obey.
no, 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 no.
Yes,
No,
yes, it is, Tariq.
no.
Yes, it is.
The general definition of a statute is just an understanding or an agreement.
Absolutely not.
That's the
Absolutely
general
not.
definition of it.
Absolutely not.
The general definition of a statute, a verbal statute, just like a
Well,
verbal agreement. Okay, why do they have the term verbal
is
agreement
that
for?
hold on? Is that
Okay.
your definition of a statute? Because I just gave you the legal definition.
Okay, sir. Why do they have the term verbal agreement that's used in courtrooms?
You'll have to be more specific, Tariq. I don't know what you mean by that.
Sir, in court, they say all the time, well, you
Yeah.
guys made a verbal agreement.
Sure.
And we're going to act on this verbal agreement that was made, and we're going to rule in this person's favor based on a verbal agreement.
Do you mean like a stipulation fact?
A verbal agreement. What's a verbal agreement?
Well, again, Tariq, I'm really trying to follow. Are you asking about like a stipulation of fact or a contract?
We're going to get into this verbal.
No, I'm just asking for an example.
Okay, verbal contracts. There are situations where there have been verbal contracts made.
Sure. Yes. Yes, there are verbal contracts all the time. Yes, sir.
Right, which is the same thing as a verbal statute. Same thing. Verbal agreement, verbal contract, verbal statute. Same thing.
Tariq, a verbal statute doesn't exist. You're making it up, sir.
Okay.
You can kick me, but it doesn't exist.
Okay.
It's not going to change.
Okay.
I've been a lawyer for 15 years. It doesn't exist.
Okay, so verbal statutes, verbal contracts, verbal agreements.
Those are all different things. Those are all different things, Tariq. You can't make those all one. They're all different things, sir.
Okay. If there's an agreement or statute, a law, because a statute is basically a law to a certain degree. There are verbal laws.
There are no verbal laws. Laws are statutes and codified, sir. There are verbal agreements. There are verbal contracts.
Laws, sir. There are unwritten laws and rules. Yes, there are.
Well, if they're unwritten, how do people follow them then?
Verbally, sir. For example, you had.
Who do I ask about these verbal laws that I don't know about?
For example, sir, in this country, they had something called sundown laws. They weren't written down, but the sundown laws were after 6 o'clock, black people are supposed to be out of certain towns. All over this country, after 6 o'clock, it was understood, it was a verbal law that a black person had to be out of town by 6 o'clock for a law.
No, that's an agreement that was never written down or codified.
Sir, that was a law that they would kill you over, sir. That's a law. They would kill you if you broke that verbal law, sir. That's 100% a law. It was a statute. It was a verbal statute.
That's a horrible thing to have, and I'm being serious on that.
And they did it, though. They did it. And that was a verbal statute that they had, sir, all over this country. Get a book called Sundown Towns by James Lowen. He broke this down all over the country. There was a verbal statute where black people would get killed if they were in certain parts of the country after 6 o'clock. They didn't write this down on the law books because it was unconstitutional. But the white supremacists said,
and Tariq, that's why it was never a law or a statute, because it was unconstitutional. It may have been a horrible.
Punishment.
Tariq, let me finish. Tariq, just let me finish, please. It may just please let me finish. It may have been a horrible thing to do. I don't agree with it. It may have been a horrible past pattern in practice. It may have been an agreement, but it was not a law. It was not codified. It was none of that. So when you say verbal,
because it was enforced, sir. A law is anything that's enforced. It was enforced, sir. That's what a law is.
Lots of things are enforced that aren't contracts. I'm sorry, that aren't codifications.
That's enforced, sir. A law has nothing to do with the judicial system. Do you understand that?
Absolutely not. The law is actually enforced in the judicial system.
No, it's not, sir. No, it's not.
Well, I think one of us has to go to law school again.
Okay, well, somebody better understand what law is. Does the law of gravity have to go through law school?
That's actually a theory, but yeah, sure. Okay, no, it doesn't.
Okay, you have the law of gravity, the law of relativity, sir.
No, those are both theories. Oh my God.
For a law. Law is just something that's enforced, something that's enforced by people or enforced by nature, sir. And the white supremacists, they enforce these common white supremacist laws that were not written down, but it was understood among white supremacists that they were going to enforce these laws that were verbal, and they still practice this right now.
Okay, well, that I don't know. I'm sure that you knew you know more about that than I do.
Mm-hmm.
I am just saying that you cannot have today, as we sit here, as I talk to you, we cannot have a verbal law, and it doesn't make it a law
Yeah.
just because someone else enforces it. That's absolutely
Yes, it
incorrect.
does. Sir, a white supremacist working in law enforcement is
I'm not
speaking
Mhm.
talking
today.
about a white
That's
supremacist, Tariq.
that's
I
what I'm
know that's
talking
your
about.
thing, but that's not what I'm talking about
That's
here.
exactly what we're talking about. What else
No,
are we
I'm
talking
talking about verbal laws don't exist, and you're trying to tell me
They do.
after 15 years of being an attorney and being DOJ that it exists.
They
I'm
do.
telling you it's not. Sometimes
I'm
it's
telling
okay
you
to
they
be
do.
wrong.
Sometimes it's okay to tell the truth about white supremacy. White supremacy makes the laws as they go along.
He's trying to make
Okay,
his
I mean,
own
I don't know
Having
point
a
that, but
yes,
I'll take your
yes,
word for
in
it.
a horrible
yes,
way.
it's true, sir.
He
You
makes
can have a
himself look
white
horrible.
supremacist working in law enforcement blow a black person's brains out for any reason, and